Well, hello everybody. We're all pretty familiar with the Orlando shooting by this point. A couple of nights ago I was working graveyard shift, and I was probably one of the first people to see the reports about it as the articles started pouring in from mainstream media. And most people were asleep. I was diving into the article, seeing what happened, what was the tragic circumstance, where was it, and everything, all those details around it. And as I proceeded to read down the article, this was a Yahoo article, and people, of course, will post comments on these articles. And of course I had to see what the comments were consisting of, and a lot of them were people's prejudices coming out in full force and in no time, stating things like it must have been another white Christian conservative, or another white Christian Republican, or white Christian thug, white this, Christian that, conservative this, Republican that. And this went on, of course, for the time that we did not yet know the demographics of the shooter. And of course, the demographics come out and totally oppose what all these people said, but they don't care. All they care about is posting their opinion. There's been so many shootings of various locations and times over the past several years, and they've been done by several demographics. The only thing that they have in common is that they were all males, and only certain demographics are going to sit here and say, yes, all males are the problem. So I'm not going to talk about them right now. That's a story for another day. But I'm hard-pressed to see why people jump on the bandwagon to blame a white male or a Christian male when there's no real demographic you can pin down if you were to look at the summation of all of these shootings. There have been some black people, there have been Hispanic people, there have been Arabic people. You could just about say people are the reason shootings happen, but I'm digressing a little bit. So other comments on Yahoo, really some not worth mentioning, but proceeded to go on about these descriptives and to blame the wrong people and to blame the guns. It's always the weapon that's to blame, not the actual shooter. It's always the weapon, the gun, to blame, and not the perpetrator of the crime. That makes no sense to me at all. And another thing I keep seeing reported in the media is the phrase assault weapon, assault weapon, assault weapon. Now, mainstream media reported that the shooter used an AR-15. Well, an AR-15 is not an assault weapon. It's a semi-automatic rifle, and one of the characteristics of an assault weapon is that it be capable of burst or automatic fire. An AR-15 is not capable of that. It's a semi-automatic rifle and does not qualify under the definition of an assault weapon. Nevertheless, the articles continue to say assault weapon, assault weapon, assault weapon, and things like automatic weapons. And it's misleading to the public. It's a lie. And I don't know about anybody else, but I don't like being lied to. Another Yahoo article talking about this started out with this being the worst mass shooting in U.S. history, which is a lie on its face. Wounded Knee had more people die, far more than this shooting did. Now, I'm not one to contest numbers. Any tragedy like this is a bad thing. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or if it's 150 or 300 or 2, you get the point. It's a terrible thing to have happen, and it makes no sense for people to go out and shoot a bunch of people and then shoot themselves. It is an interesting thought to look into what may drive a particular individual to take this course in life, albeit a short one. I saw on Facebook numerous memes about it, mostly anti-gun memes, things calling for the banning of private ownership of firearms in the hands of citizens, of civilians. Both those words were used. And this would be a grave mistake, of course. History has shown us in the 20th century alone that when a government can confiscate the arms of its citizens, the government then turns on the citizens and rounds up all dissidents. Tens of millions of people died in the 20th century after they were disarmed. Government cannot be trusted to keep itself in check when the people are not there to do it. History has shown this. So anyway, back to some other comments I saw on Facebook and on Yahoo. One of the arguments I saw, as usual, coming up is the one that the Second Amendment applies only to muskets. And we know this is just not the case. The Supreme Court has not ruled this, and very few people agree with it. They don't believe it. If the Second Amendment applies to muskets, then the First Amendment, freedom of speech, applies to standing on the corner of town square yelling at the top of your lungs. Now you can see how absurd that sounds. So no, the Second Amendment applies to today's weaponry as well. And our force as citizens should equal that of government in order to keep tyranny from overtaking the people. And I've heard people say, well, you don't need a tank, you don't need nukes, you don't need an aircraft carrier. Well, you're right, but you know what? The government is not going to use an aircraft carrier or a nuke or a tank against little old me. So that, too, is a worn-out argument, the antiquity of the Second Amendment. Never mind that 44 of our state constitutions also recognize our individual right to keep and bear arms. Now, 6 of the state constitutions don't. California, New York, I think Maryland, Iowa, Minnesota, and the last one escapes me. So some of those you kind of expect. California and New York, I expect that, even though it should be in all 50 states' constitutions, in my opinion. So I've heard people say NRA, NRA, NRA in their comments and in their posts, and blaming the NRA for people getting killed is like blaming Toyota for their car crashing into somebody. It's like blaming Ginsu when somebody cuts themselves with a kitchen knife. Somebody commented on Facebook how the NRA doesn't even care that people commit suicide by guns. Well, using myself as an example, if I close my garage door and start my engine to take my own life, I don't expect Toyota to make a public statement. I don't expect Ginsu to be culpable if I were to take my life by cutting my wrist. So that argument falls flat. It makes no sense to even blame them for this. What does make sense is to blame the perpetrator of the crime. There's a novel thought, personal responsibility, that seems to escape the thinking of some people. They want to think that they're doing something good by calling for the outlawing of firearms in private hands, when in reality they're setting up a nation to fail, or they're at least helping them get there. This is not a good thing. One of the ideas of preparedness is self-defense, being able to protect yourself and your loved ones against ne'er-do-wells, criminals who would come and take your life, take your stuff, take whatever. And we are allowed by law, in most, if not all states, to defend our homes, our families, and our property from people who would want to do us harm or steal from us. I would just as soon not have to kill anybody. I don't want to do that, and I don't want that on my head. But if I'm protecting loved ones, I'll do my best I can to protect them. And maybe someday it could cost me my life. I hope not. I hope it doesn't cost anybody a life. That's what this whole debate has been all about these last couple of days, is costing lives, and we don't want lives to be taken. Common sense gun ownership and trained use is the best defense against a lot of these things. Like toddlers somehow getting hold of a gun and then shooting somebody with it. Where was the parent? Anyway, just my thoughts for the day. Please feel free to leave your comments, and have a good night.